Quick look at the overview. Like I said, we're going to walk through visually the demo of the form. I'd like to just very briefly go through the benefits that are outlined on the user guide. What I'm really hoping for you today is to walk away with an increased level of confidence in using this form. Now, we're not hiring students on a large scale right now, and we've actually gone the other way, of course, unfortunately, on campus. But when that does happen, I'm hoping that this is a resource that you can come back to. It will be recorded. It's being recorded right now. So this in addition to that user guide. Feel free, like I said, I'm going to try to answer as many questions as I can today, so pose those in chat or hold on to them till the end. There will be some time. Some benefits here. Again, it just streamlines the process. As we can see, being online with a lot of our steps, we need to be able to adapt to that time, and so it eliminates paper, which is awesome. It reduces wait time for steps to be completed. It does as well integrate with other campus shifts to online hiring processes. As you know, we have moved to the Form I-9 online. In the past semester, W-4 is being completed online. Direct deposit for all employees, including students. Reduces risks and errors. Administration is improved. And then there's online retention of hiring documents, not only in your email, and we'll look at what that looks like in a moment, but then also in BP Logix. So lots of great benefits. There are others that are supplemental to this, but these are some of the big ones. Again, these are outlined in your user guide. Without further ado, we're going to jump in to not only how you access the form in multiple different ways, but then also just an overview and filling it out itself. So bear with me while I transition over here to a new page. So now you should be seeing a web page. I want to show you a couple different ways that you can access the form itself, but then also looking at other resources that we've made available to you. Just a quick highlight on those. The first way that I want to show you is actually going to the student employment site on our human resources page. So hopefully you all are familiar with that. There's a couple drop downs here. Hiring managers, you have your own set of resources, including, again, I'm going to highlight the other Form I-9, W-4 links. This link right here is really the important one for us today. I replaced the old downloadable student hiring request form with a link to the BP Logix form. So if I were to click on this right now, it would take me to the live site to fill out a new form. If I were to click that, it would take me to the form, but we're not going to do that right now. If I go ahead and click on coordinators, some other links here as well. The user guide is here for you as an ongoing resource. It's also been put up here underneath hiring managers. I'm going to encourage you, I might say this again, but I'm going to encourage you to process how this is going to change your department's workflow and how you might need to implement new training for hiring managers or budgetary approvers, time approvers, and just any notifications you might need to give them before you get started. It's a pretty easy workflow, but just giving them a heads up might be beneficial. So that's option one for accessing the new form. Again, you're going to click on this link. Option two is actually going straight to BP Logix, and I understand I've gotten some feedback that not everybody is using BP Logix all that much until maybe this online change. So let's navigate to BP Logix. Go to our River Falls page, click on Faculty and Staff, Resources for Faculty and Staff. I'm going to scroll down to where I get to BP Logix here on the left, this button. And if I wasn't logged in with my W number and password, once it loads, it would ask me to actually log in. Because you can't actually fill out any of these forms without being logged in. Quick overview here, some things that you're going to need to know how to navigate. My tasks opens up right away. That's any tasks that have been assigned to you based on the form that's being filled out. So if you're the payroll coordinator and your hiring manager has filled this out, it goes through the approval process, and then it ends up in your My Tasks window. You also get an email about it that you won't be seeing as part of today's demo, but they do trigger automatic emails, the steps do, for that person who is responsible. And those responsible tasks show up right here in your My Tasks. If you want to start a new form, again, this is the second way you can start a new form. You come here to start a new form on the left, choose Human Resources, because that's the department that this form is under. And you see that our list is growing. You may have interacted with a few of these. I'm going to navigate to the Student Help Hiring Request, and I would click on that, and it's going to open up here. And this is essentially how you're going to get started with that. Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and close that because I'm actually going to fill this out in our testing area. It allows me to kind of control the process a little bit more. It looks exactly the same, but it's going to allow me to do some things on the back end that show you what you need to see. So again, I'm going to start a new form here. Go to Human Resources. Open up Student Help Hiring Requests. And we're ready to go. A couple things to know before we actually start into the form. I want to make some things pretty clear. Before you actually get to this stage where you're filling out the form, you're probably going to have a department-specific process. So whether that be an application, that might still be paper, right, where a student fills out a level of interest application, and from there you use that information to fill out the hiring form. Maybe that's reflective of an old process of yours, or it's just hey, I got the student's name and email on a piece of paper because I know they're interested in this job, and then I can go on to the actual form itself. If you have questions about what that looks like for your department, we're happy to assist you or answer any questions you might have. A couple other things to note: that this form needs to be completed before any other steps. So I know that this is a strange time, and there's been some filled out prior to, there's been some HRS steps filled out prior to this form being completed, but really going forward, we need this form to be initiated and completed before the job is entered for that student in HRS, just because the order is important in terms of keeping things clear and clean. This form is initiated, again, by hiring managers and or a payroll coordinator. Either one can do that, depending on how your department is set up. It's used to process new student hires on campus, so not rehires. And again, a rehire is a student who has worked in your department with the same job title. And that's where this initial question comes in that we'll get to in a second. A couple other things to note is that this form does not communicate directly with HRS. So when you trigger a start on this, it doesn't also create a job record. So we had some concern about, if I accidentally start this too soon, does it create a job record? No, it doesn't. So that's why we have you start this first, and then it meets up with HRS through some of your additional steps. All right, without further ado, let's just jump right into the form. Unless anyone has any questions, I'll kind of just, I'll pause again. Just going to watch the chat there. Nope, okay. All right, so as I mentioned, when you open this form for a new student hire, what you're going to want to do is answer this first question. This is a filter question that's going to help you know whether or not this is the right form for you. The question is, has this student hire worked for this department under the same job title? If that's yes, and I'm going to click through, it's going to actually create a hard stop here, and it's going to say, hey, thanks for answering the question. There is an actual easier way to process a rehire. Right now, we are still using a paper form for rehire. We're in the process of analyzing that As we know, there will be a big need for rehires whenever that's able to happen. But for now, I ask you to click to download that student rehire form, which is in the Excel format. Once you have that downloaded, maybe you already have it on your computer because we've been using it for quite a while, go ahead and click to cancel this form. That cancels it out so that it's not sitting out there as in your task list or anything like that. So for today, I'm not going to click on that because we're actually going to fill out a form as if we're hiring a student for a new employment instance. Again, maybe they have worked in your department, but it's a brand new job for them. You would use this form. So first section here that you need to fill out on this student hiring request form is information about you, the initiator of the form. You'll notice that it pulled in information about me because I'm logged in, pulled in the date that I'm filling this out, my name and my email. You may see some preset options drop in here. That's only because I've been filling out a few of these, just a few to say the least, in my tests. So I'm going to fill out using my work phone number. Fill in there. I'm going to choose the department, which would be Human Resources. You'll notice that after certain selections, the form actually pauses to load. So I encourage you to just be patient and let it load. It's trying to pull information from multiple databases. So when I clicked Human Resources, it pulled in a department number automatically. I'm going to choose the building that I work in and that the job is going to take place in. And here's where the first level of choice comes in for you, depending on the department that you work in. Time approvers need to be indicated as they were on the paper form. Depending on the department, like I said, I'm sorry, not time approvers, my mistake, the hiring approvers. And these are people who have budgetary approver authority in your department. There's a note about that here down below. Up to 2 approvers can be designated. Only 1 is required through this form. However, your department might require 2. So the order in which you enter these is the order in which they are triggered to fill out their portion or complete their portion of the steps. So if I were to fill in, I'm actually going to put myself for these because I'm going to put myself in the second one. We'll pretend that the department I work in only requires 1. You wouldn't normally do this, right? You don't approve your own hires. But because I need to move the steps along, I'm going to do that for today. If I had another one again that I wanted to have approved first before me, I could do that as well by entering their name. Notice when I click on here, I want to note this as well. A search bar drops down. I can search anyone on campus that I want to in the UWRF system. So if I wanted to search, I know Deb is in here today. I could enter her name. If that's a mistake, I can also click this X and it removes any entries there. Scrolling down a bit more, another selection for you as options here. The question is this a UWRF student? If yes, the form is essentially going to stay as is. It's loading here. I would then select the employee name field, and I'm also going to hire myself today. Again, it's pulling from multiple databases, so we're going to be patient. It's going to pull in an email address, the student's email address. If you're prompted to choose a student, so let's go back in here. I'm going to cancel out that name. If you're prompted to choose a student, I'm going to put in Heather. So if Heather were to have a student email here, but then also a work email, I'm going to ask that you choose her student email, the student's student-based email. There's been some difficulties getting students access to their work emails. So as the default, if you can, choose their student email. it'll say work after this name here if it's their work email. Going back up here, if they are not a current UWRF student, so if they're a student somewhere else on campus but we're hiring them for a job, I would click no here. I enter their name. This does not pull from a field, right, because it doesn't have a database to pull from. You enter their email. It would not pull on student without an ID. They don't have one. And that's how you would do it for a non-UWRF student. I'm going to go back in here though and click yes here. Again, I start typing my name and I see there's actually multiple Micahs in the system, but for today I'm going to do myself. Wait for it to load again. You see that it pulled in my HRS ID. If it knows it, if it can pull it from somewhere. If it doesn't, you'll have a chance to, for instance, if this is a template hire and they've never worked on campus, it won't have one of those. You'll have a chance to enter that in once you complete the HRS steps later. All right, so in this field, you're going to enter the hourly wage, and that needs to be between $7.25, which is minimum wage, and the top end limit, which is $20 on campus. If you were to do anything below $7.25, the form would require you to provide justification, right? So you type in a reason here. But for today, I'm going to type in 12. You'll notice that I can just type in the digit itself. I don't have to type in a value. So $12.25 an hour. Once I click out of that or hit tab, the form is actually going to auto value that. You saw the $ being pulled in. Next step here is to choose the anticipated employment start date. Again, if you don't know for sure that they're able to start on that date, you can still put in. So let's say April 10th is going to be the start date. You want to give yourself as much time as possible between when you're filling this out and that anticipated start date, because when I click out of that employment start date, you're going to see this FYI pop up. This is going to be a little different maybe than in the past for some of you, and we as an office are happy to answer any questions you might have, but we really need the I-9 process to be completed in full, so that's step 1 and 2, the verification of identification, before the student starts the work. So that's a reminder here to say, well, if I choose that the student is starting tomorrow, that might not give you enough time to actually complete those steps. And that's going to pop up every time. We'll go tomorrow just for that sake. It's just as a reminder. Employment start date is required. Expected job date is not required. Some jobs do not have an anticipated or expected job end date. If yours does, go ahead and enter it there. The field here, working title, I'm going to enter HR desk. I'll just do HR test desk help. Because it's important to enter a unique working title to not only help you in your processing of this, but then also in HRS and for the student who may have more than one job on campus. So when they go to clock time, it's important for them to be able to quickly identify which one that is. You're going to choose the job code that applies to this job. The default is that student help. So I'm going to click that today. The other option is res life and upward bound RAs only. You're going to choose whether or not to use work study funding. And you'll notice it's going to load a secondary question. If I choose yes, and that is the default on campus, but if you don't want to, you can also choose no. If you choose yes, you do need to choose the secondary option here of, is the job on campus, is it off campus, or is it part of the America Reads program? You can't actually move on or submit the form until you choose the next thing. If you figure out that, hey, that's not actually a work study job, you can actually just click do not use work study funds, and it'll make those fields disappear. Here's where those time approvers come into play. Again, one is required. here with this red outline. For most departments, I believe 2 are required, but again, that's going to depend on your department. You probably have a better understanding of what that requires for you. I'm going to put in, I know they're in the chat today. They get a little time in the spotlight. You actually don't have to do anything today, Deb or Rhonda, but they would maybe be the time approvers for this hire. Then I choose time entry methods. In the HR office, we would often use for our student hires timesheet, but you may choose web clock depending on the job. The next question I want to highlight, I'll spend a little bit of time on. There's been some confusion on this in the past. We need you to indicate whether or not this is a position of trust, because that determines if they need a background check or not. There's a little bit of a question here to help you understand if they need it, if they are in a position of trust. I encourage you to read through that if you're not familiar with why someone would be. If you click yes, again, a drop-down happens here, and choose one or more of the reasons why they would be in a position of trust. If I select yes and they have a significant or unsupervised access to vulnerable populations, and once I hit submit, it'll actually trigger an automatic email to our HR inbox to start the background check process. Gone are the days where you have to call us separately or wait for us to notice that it's a position of trust. We do ask you to check in periodically to make sure that's happening, but it does trigger to us to start that process and to complete the process. The last step in the initiator form is to enter funding sources. So I'm just going to enter a fake number here, but you have funding sources that you use frequently for your job, so you're going to know what those are. So again, fund is 3 digits, program is 1 digit, and the department ID is 6 digits. Again, this is not a real number. And then you need to indicate how much of a distribution that is. If this was a real account, once it loads, sometimes it takes a little bit longer than usual. Once it loads, it'll actually load the account name into this field here. So it's good to check against what you know to be true, where it's pulling that funding from. This form will actually allow you to fill in and submit a form if that doesn't pop up, but it may just require some more verification on another step. If this job requires more than one account or is pulling from more than one account, you can do that. Just you click the Add Account button. You can also delete a full row if you realize you don't need that. So I'm going to delete that second row there. The last thing here, and the initiator step, is this comment box. It's not going to be required at all for most people, but if there are comments that you feel are important to note going forward in the process, go ahead and enter those in. One of the things we identified where that might come in handy is up here with the job code. Maybe student help is the default, but you know that in your department there's actually a supplemental or additional job code that is helpful in your process. So that might be one thing that you enter into this comment field. From there, you have a couple options, and I'm not going to go into what all of the buttons do today, but you do have in your user guide who uses those buttons and what they do. If you save, it saves all the information that you've entered here. But I'm going to submit because that pushes the form on to the next process. Because I'm logged in, you're going to see a number of these forms actually pop up automatically. When you're doing this as a payroll coordinator or as a hiring manager, that won't be the case. It'll just minimize the window and push an email notification to that person who is next in the process. Next in the process is actually the student who's being hired. So you'll see here a little bit of background. I'm going to breeze through this. The student has a chance to fill out information about themselves. So they can choose, are they an international student? And that opens up some fields down here below about passport, visa type, program start and end date. But I am not an international student. So I'm going to fill in, again, these are preset things that I have. Ask them to select gender, date of birth, date of birth, it actually, just for your note, it won't allow them to enter a date that indicates they're younger than 16 years old. So the form is smart enough, there's some logic in it, to stop them from doing that. Social Security number, I'm just going to enter a fake one here. And this actually has a security feature of show and hide that allows this to be visible to the payroll coordinator and HR only later on down the process. They would enter their address, phone number, type of phone number. If they know their Falcon ID, this is another chance for them to enter that on the form. Have they previously been employed? I have not. Where are you enrolled? This is a chance for, if the student is not a UWRF student, they would select other, enter the location, so maybe it's another nearby university or institution, and then they'd attach an enrollment verification that would be pinned to this hiring form going on. So you'd be able to access that and view it and download it as a payroll coordinator to verify their enrollment later on down the process. I'm going to pretend I am a UWRF student. I'm taking 12 credits during the employment period, which would be in the fall. Hopefully we're back up and running by then. I can indicate the amount of federal work study accepted, and then anywhere else on campus that I'm currently employed. I can enter as many employment instances as I need to, selecting the department, supervisor, hours, and so forth. The last step for the student, very quickly, is to click and review that hours of agreement verification for employees. You can see that here. It used to be a paper form that they fill out separately. They do have to attest that they've read it, and they have to sign it. Right? They'd have to type in their name here. Anything they type in is a legally binding signature, right? Because they've clicked this and signed it. It also date stamps, so we know when they completed it. They could save that, but really, the most likely they're going to submit it here. Again, you won't see this process, but I wanted to show you what the student, because you're a payroll coordinator, probably, if you're on this call, you would then get an email to take you to this step. I've kind of pre-populated one so that you can see the payroll coordinator processing step as part of this. It's kind of the final thing before it gets to the HR side of things. Again, here's the form. It's mostly filled out. It's been approved at this point by a budgetary approver. As I scroll down, you can see it is lengthy because it includes not only the initiated information, but the student data all in one. That's important because the payroll coordinator now, if there's more than one payroll coordinator, I'm going to ask you to come down here, and there will actually be a button that says accept task. And I apologize that it doesn't say that today, but you'll see if there's more than one payroll coordinator in your department, it'll have been sent to both of you. And if you accept this task, basically saying, I'm going to keep this process moving along, it takes it and puts this task for this hire in your My Tasks window and out of that other payroll coordinator's as an option. Once you accept the task, you're ready to use the information on this form to actually go into HRS and complete the next steps in the process, whether this is the template hire or adding an employment instance. Again, there are some additional steps that we're not going to go over today, but once you complete those, you're going to come back to the form and you're going to fill in any additional information that isn't here. If the employee has already worked on campus and they have an employee ID, again, it would have auto-populated in here. If it was blank, for instance, for a template hire, HRS would populate an employee ID for you. You'd enter that here. You would also enter a job record number. Okay. Before that happens, however, and I apologize for doing this a little bit out of order, after you've accepted the task, like I said at the very beginning of this webinar, we're going to ask that the I-9 is completed before anything else is done. So if you're a payroll coordinator, the first time you see this form, whether you're initiating or whether you're seeing it at this payroll coordinator processing step, you need to indicate whether or not the student needs an I-9, whether this hire needs an I-9. So again, you can do that with the list that we sent you for the last calendar year of students who have an I-9 on file, or you can use the GIS online webpage to find if there's an active I-9 for them. If they need an I-9, you're going to click yes, and then you're going to put the process on hold. A hold button will actually appear down here because you can't complete the form until the I-9 has been filled out. All right, I'm going to click no today just because I already have an I-9 on file. Okay. Once the I-9, though, if this was yes, once the I-9 has been completed, step 1 and step 2, you're going to come back in here and you're going to choose an actual employment start date. That needs to match what's on the I-9. That's very, very important. So for not only our internal processes, but also on the government level, we need those to match. Note real quick too, if you choose yes to the I-9 and then you hit hold here, it's going to actually trigger an email to the student hire saying that they need to complete that step. Okay? I encourage you to check in with the student and just make sure not only that they receive that email, but also that they are diligent about completing that step, because really that's going to be one of the biggest holdups. Even though it's digital as well, electronic, I encourage you to keep that process moving along. Again, if it was yes and they've done that, they've come in and verified their documents to you, you come in here and you choose an actual employment start date. Let's say there's a few days of delay. It was supposed to be on the 27th that this hire started, but because of document availability, they couldn't actually start till the 4/30 of this month. Again, you go back into HRS at this point, enter all that information. It brings out a job record number. If it's a template, right, it's going to be 0. If it's just another employment instance, you're going to enter whatever that job record number is that HRS gives you. And that pretty much brings you to the end of your process as a payroll coordinator. What you do then, I encourage you to always be checking the form and what it looks like, making sure that data is correct, but also, as you noted, there are multiple steps along the way that that will ensure accuracy, from the initiator step to approver step to your step here. So once you're done with your steps as a payroll coordinator, you hit submit. It'll ask you, yes, do you want to submit that? And it'll say this form has been submitted, and that actually pushes it to Human Resources, where we help complete the last step in the process. I'm not going to show you that today because that's not so important for you to know. But that's the form in its entirety, and I know that was really quick, but I wanted to give you a walkthrough of what it looks like from multiple stages that you may or may not see at different points depending on the hire. It is important, though, I'm going to stress that after you complete the HRS steps, that you return to BP Logix, whether that form is on hold or you just have it on another tab to complete the process, because otherwise it just sits in your task window and doesn't actually move to the Human Resources side of the equation. After the form is complete, a couple of things happen. BP Logix actually sends an email to the initiator, to payroll coordinators, to Human Resources to indicate that the hire is complete. And then the in-person step really takes shape for you. Any training that needs to happen. There's also an email that gets sent to the student on the first day of the job, reminding them to fill out any online W-4, direct deposit, and to be on the lookout for law room trainings as well.